I've just got a PowerPoint to go up. And some more beautiful images of Banks Peninsula if you want to drop the lights. Yeah. Is it going to come up? Yeah, I'm just waiting for that PowerPoint to come up. I'm speaking to you now on behalf of the New Zealand Native Forest Restoration Trust. This is a North Island organisation, and it is the group that's involved with this project that Gary introduced about the water catchment in Akaroa. So the Rod Donald Trust is acting as their local agent for them because they are a North Island organisation, which is why I'm presenting, and I present apologies from Jeff Davidson, the New Zealand Native Forest Trust manager. Now, the New Zealand Restoration Trust is a North Island organisation that is the largest landowner of native forest in New Zealand outside of the government. They have 28 reserves, and all of their reserves are protected by QE2 covenant. This is a map of where the reserves are. You can see they're all in the North Island except for one. So I think we're really lucky that we've got this North Island organisation showing an interest in our area at this time. Their interest is in protecting biodiversity throughout New Zealand's forests and wetlands. And this is an image of their only reserve in the South Island so far, up at the top of Golden Bay. But now they're looking at buying a reserve in Akaroa with some land that's on the market. And their interest in this is because this piece of land that has come up is adjacent to the the Henawai Reserve, which I hope that you're all familiar with. Henawai, one of the jewels of Banks Peninsula, absolutely fantastic native forest restoration reserve run by Hugh Wilson. Now the site is, the land is all above the Akaroa township, up at the top of the ridge there, and it laps over the ridge into Henawai. Now this image, a little difficult, but if you can look at this, this is the guts of the project here. The shot is Google Earth. It's taken as though you were a bird flying above Akaroa, looking up the hill. So down the bottom, Mayor Vicky Buck, I don't want to shine this in your eyes. I'll just be very careful. But there is Akaroa Township down the bottom there. There's the ridge line up the top that we were looking at that shot from across the water. Henawai's over the back of the hill. The land we're talking about is up the top here, and the significance of it to council is that it is the main Akaroa water catchment. So the proposal from New Zealand Native Forest Trust is a two-stage proposal. In stage one, they are wanting to purchase, and they haven't purchased it yet, they have a confirmed, they have their offer accepted. There's a 190 hectare block at the top of the hill, and they are looking for council contribution, first of all support and principle for the project, and then taking a 40% financial stake in recognition of the catchment benefit. I'm not presenting any hard figures here today because we are not in a public excluded session and to protect the project and the vendor and the interests of the purchaser. But 40% stake is what they are looking for. And then in stage two, the New Zealand Native Forest Trust are proposing to purchase the lower block, this outlined in the pale orange, but that's a little bit more complicated. There is an old dwelling on the property that needs to be subdivided off first, for the Forest Trust are interested in the land, not owning a house. So for stage two, they are asking for no contribution from the council, but the contribution in stage one gives the Forest Trust enough funding to be able to afford stage two. And just in terms of that water intake, so there's the water intake there. The water then goes into a pipe. It goes all the way down to Lorb Hill Reservoir, which is above Akaroa, and that is the main water supply for Akaroa. So I'll zoom in a little closer on this catchment now so you can get a feeling for it. There is some really steep land up at the top here, and you can see how it is riddled with all these little rivulets of water that come down off the hill. It creates three main streams. There's one, there's two, there's three. They all join together here where the main water intake is for Akaroa. The property is currently farmed, and what that means is that it's grazed with sheep, so there is fecal contamination of that water supply, and it is aerial sprayed as well. The farmer has been asked in the past by the council to fence all those little streams, but as he's quite rightly said, that is completely impossible to fence all those little streams going up. Look at the terrain there. You couldn't put a fence up that. But under this forest trust management, the whole thing would become a bush reserve, the grazing stock would be removed, the perimeter would be fenced, there would be no more spraying, and bush regeneration would be the focus of the project. So that's a really practical way to manage this catchment. There's very strong local support for this project. First of all, these slides, I must say, making everyone look awfully fat. They're not that fat. We have got a healthy, yes, these are healthy people. We have a very public-spirited vendor here, Mr. Graham Curry, who is offering this property at substantially below market rate to the project. The proposal is that it will be managed by Hugh Wilson and his team from Hinawai Reserve. The community board are strongly supporting this project. The Rod Donald Trust was so impressed when it came across our desk that the trust is putting in a 20% stake and doing the local work for them, and the Ecan Zone Committee are putting in the money for the fencing. So the catchment benefits will be in this. The bush is going to come back rapidly because there's a lot of bush there to start with in the gullies, as you've seen. We'll have improved water quality without the grazing and the spraying. We'll have much improved water retention as that block fills up with bush, and water supply has been a huge problem in Akaroa for years. Reduced sedimentation and a greatly reduced risk of slips and waterway damage if this project goes ahead. And the benefits to the council of being involved, and by the way, this image now shows you it's sort of from just below the really steep bit, so you're looking down towards Akaroa and you can get a sense of the bush that's on the block and how all these little rivulets join up. The water intake's about there. You're talking about protecting a catchment asset that's worth well over $1 million, for which the council, by the time the whole project's done, would have a 30% stake. You're talking about third party managing it at no cost to the ratepayer, and you're talking about, if the council becomes involved in this project, it having a stake in the management plan at this stage rather than being cut out of the story. And there are wider benefits of this whole project as well. Akaroa has become the premier tourism town for Canterbury, and its water supply is increasingly vulnerable as more people are going through that town. But as well as protecting the catchment, the Forest Trust will open this block up for public access with walking tracks, so it will create increased recreational opportunities. The childhood home of Frank Arthur Worsley, the greatest export we have from Akaroa, is up on that block, so there's historic interest, and it will secure that beautiful landscape up behind the town in perpetuity as well. So that's where I'll stop and open for questions. Thank you.
I realise you're not talking dollars this afternoon, Suki, and for very good reason, but of course for us to be able to consider this fully, we need to know that dollar value. So if you were able to supply that to us confidentially, that would be great.
Yes, I can send that. Should I send that through the staff?
Thank you very much. Yep, that would be good.
That.
And when is it's obviously under contract at the moment. When are those figures able to be put in the public domain? Presumably when the contract goes unconditional or when the deal's done? Yeah,
when the contract goes unconditional, I think there wouldn't be a problem. But at this stage, really the project is waiting to see whether the council will contribute to it or not. And on the basis of that, Forest Trust will have to decide, you know, whether they're going ahead, and if so, to what extent they are going ahead with the project, whether both pieces of land or just one.
Yep, so if you can supply those figures, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
I will.
Just on the spraying affecting the water supply, is that significant? Is it safe or is it treated?
Well, the water is all treated as it comes into Akaroa, so we all assume as we drink it that it's perfectly safe, and I'm sure that it is. But the less contaminated the water is when it comes in, the less treatment, obviously, it's going to require.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Much. You can just stay there now if you like.
I can just stay there on my other presentation.
And go on to the Robinsons Bay Ratepayers and Residents Association.
Yeah, okay. And show. Sorry, I'm sure someone from council will get this other presentation up for me because I don't know where you put it on your computer. So the second presentation I'm doing, I have to change hats now and represent the Robinsons Bay residents and, it's that one, Ratepayers Association. And I'm also speaking to that, and I'm also speaking to my own personal submission. Thank you very much. Now, I've got great support here from Robinsons Bay. Sue, are you going to come up as well? There aren't enough chairs. My neighbours from Robinsons Bay, great community, all here to support this submission. So wonderful to have everyone here. Again, if we can have the lights down, because we've got some lovely slides of Robinsons Bay here. So first of all, just to remind everyone where Robinsons Bay is, it's in the Akaroa Harbour between Devotial and Akaroa, and as you come out from Christchurch to Akaroa, you get this beautiful view of the Robinsons Bay Wharf in the bay. Now, this wharf is a strategic recreational asset for the whole area. Before it was closed, it was used for swimming, fishing, boating, and extensively used by residents and visitors alike. It was built and it has been maintained by the community. The current structure dates from 1914 and was built by Robinsons Bay resident Jim Hayward. It, at the early stages, was used to import and export goods by sea from the wharf, and who knows, we may need another access into Robinsons Bay in the future, especially given the state of Highway 75 after the recent lot of slips. So not to be sneezed at having boat access into our remote community. Back in the old days, there was a tramway that went along the wharf. The tram lines are still there. Now, in much more recent times, the wharf has been repaired by the local residents in a working bee in 2004 after years of council, but we can say Banks Peninsula Council, not your council, neglect. And at that time, it was raised to a higher standard than it had been previously. But the interesting thing is, before that, it wasn't closed when it needed repairs. We could all still use it, even though it needed an upgrade. But generations of children have learnt to swim off this wharf in Robinsons Bay. It's the best place for swimming. It's our swimming pool. The beach areas are mud flats. They're pretty icky, and to make them worse, they've got sharp stones in them, so you don't want to be walking out into the water in Robinsons Bay across the beach. And the wharf has been popular with kids of all ages, kids learning to swim, teenagers jumping off the wharf, fishing, all that sort of thing. But here's the sorry sight since December 2011, this horrible gate put across it, and it's closed, and we're not allowed to use it anymore. And the reason is because a 4 kilopascal of pressure standard is being applied to that wharf. What that means is 400 kilograms per square metre of pressure. That's 4 huge people per square metre, or 5.5 of me, the average New Zealand woman, per square metre of that wharf. So what we've got is a vehicular standard being applied to a pedestrian structure, and it's an example of stupid safety. Now, that's a term that's been coined, I think, by the cycling fraternity, and as a keen cyclist myself, I am sure that the life risk I was exposed to today in riding my bike across Christchurch to come here and make my submission is much higher than walking out on that wharf in its present condition. The barrier is ineffective to the determined. These pictures are taken from a video that Sue Lovett found on the internet of some young tourists climbing around the barrier and going out on the wharf. But it is preventing other people from using it. My family don't swim here anymore, so we're cutting out families with children who used to swim down there and kids who learned to swim there, and we're cutting out the elderly. This is an old Robinsons Bay identity, Jessie Mould, enjoying herself out on the wharf in 2007. It was her uncle that had built this wharf in the first place. Elderly people like Jessie can't go there anymore. We had elderly visitors from the UK this summer. We couldn't take them swimming off the wharf. It was really sad. So that's who's being precluded from using the wharf. But we think there are plenty of solutions to this problem. First of all, apply a meaningful safety standard for pedestrian usage to this structure, and then reassess what work is actually necessary. And in the meantime, reopen the wharf with a usage limit sign. Here's one. That's taken from the wharf at Little Akaroa. I've just popped it on our wharf instead. Motor vehicles prohibited, so that would do. And here's another one you could put up. This is the sign that's used on all the bridges and things that DOC have on their remote bridges out in the bush, maximum load so many people. So, you know, we could have maximum load 20 people and that would be fine. We don't need to have a rave out there on Robinson's Bay Wharf. And if more significant work is needed, then we want you to empower and involve the local community. The community are willing to fundraise and to volunteer once again. I personally am perfectly willing to put in a substantial financial donation towards the repair of this facility on my backyard. And in my personal opinion, and part of my personal submission, I believe that you should reallocate the funding that you currently have allocated to the Robinson's Bay Reserve Project here and defer the reserve project, which is to put interpretation into a small reserve in Robinson's Bay, down the track. Now, a lot of money has been spent on the reserve in Robinson's Bay. There's a walking track been put in, but there isn't even a sign to tell the public that that reserve exists. But in these brochures that the Rod Donald Trust just handed out to you, the Robinson's Bay Reserve for the first time is on the map, and there's public information that it exists now, and there's a whole panel giving the story of Robinson's Bay in these brochures. I think you should just put a track counter on the gate and see how much that reserve is actually being used, and in the meantime put the money into this structure, which we know is very well used and loved by the public. So thank you all again for listening to me for 2 submissions now, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. And have you got a question of her?
I haven't got a question, but I have got I'm speaking also on behalf of the Robinson's Bay Ratepayers Association and on behalf of the Robinson's Bay Domain Reserve. I'm Pippa Foley, resident of Robinson's Bay. I understand where Suki's coming from, but the Robinson's Bay Domain Committee are really excited with the way that the council have offered to develop that domain as a teaching domain. We're absolutely thrilled. Robinson's Bay is a little section, and I can see it being used. There are a lot of schools that come over to Akaroa, you know, on social studies trips, a lot that are used in Takamatua. And if Robinson's Bay is a little teaching domain, as the council have put out, with first of all the bush, then the farming and the Coxford, and back again now to conservation, it just will be a wonderful thing. So I just want to make sure that that last part is Suki's.
We could have an argument here.
No, we're
I
not
think
having an
that we
argument,
could do
but
the same thing for
I would
about
hate
a
to see
quarter
that
or
money
an
taken
eighth or a
away.
tenth of the price, and put the money into the reserve, into the wharf.
Sorry.
I did, and given the last comment, it's likely to be a contentious one. I'll ask the questions anyway. How many dollars are we talking about transferring from the Reserve Management Fund to the wharf to do the work? Is it supported by the Reserve Management Committee in principle, or is there, you know, the opportunity for negotiation there? And probably the more important question: do the community have the capacity to do the work that's required on the wharf? Like, if the funding is found, whether it's from the reserve budget or whether it's from elsewhere, can the community have you got the capacity within the community to do that work?
Well, the amount of money, first of all, it's over 2 years. It's this year and next year. 30,000, I think, was already spent on the reserve this year. So there's about 60-odd thousand in the budget over the next 2 years to put interpretation signage in, and then to create a bus park in Robinson's Bay. In terms of do we have the capacity to actually manage doing the project? Well, we did it last time. I don't think we've actually been given the engineering reports or anything like that, but I think we're perfectly capable of hiring subcontractors to get on with the work if we needed to do it.
The Robinson's Bay Domain Board will accept that they possibly could pay for an engineering report, but that is as far as they want to share the money, I can assure you. I did a ring round before I came, and there's quite a few that want the domain because they feel the community will raise the money for the wharf. The wharf is so popular that they feel the community will come to the party with quite a bit of funding.
Great. So what we're hearing is there's a willingness for the Reserves Management Committee, the Domain Board, to work with the community in repairing the wharf, which is fantastic, and there's certainly a willingness on the part of the community to do everything they can to get the wharf up and running. I do have one other question, if I may. You've obviously had some contact with the community board on this. Are you willing to work with the community board to progress the restoration of the wharf project?
Well, I should have said at the beginning, actually, apologies for Lee Robinson, who's been the chair of this and who's been driving the Robinsons Bay Wharf submissions. And I don't think there's any problem at all. Why would we not want to work with the community board? We'd love to work with the community board.
Yep, and that's also great. I mean, the community board could actually be a vehicle for getting this moving. So, excellent. Thank you.
You, and thank you very, very much indeed. And thank you for the whole of Robinsons Bay for coming over too. That's fantastic. Lovely to see you.